And we are live. Hello, hello. Welcome everyone. Welcome to this very special first look at the findings and key insights from National Clearing Survey 2020. This is going to be a unique opportunity for our partners and our clients, and it gives us an opportunity to take you through the results from the NCS so far and analyse them and help you to plan for next year's activity, but also make any changes to current campaigns that you've got for the January deadline as well. So by way of agenda for the day, I'm going to be taking you through sort of setting the scene, talking about clearing 2020, where we are now, and then we're going to be going through an overview of the data that we've collected from the NCS, looking at the key audience segments and the top 5 key findings from this year's survey. Now, we do want it to be as conversational as possible. We want to engage and make sure that you're able to ask questions and we can answer them in real time. So we're going to have key points where our panelists are going to discuss the findings and sort of top 5 findings and analyse them and give you the opportunity to ask questions, and we'll answer them during those key points as well. So if you do want to ask a question please put it into the Q&A box, and then we'll be going through that each section. And also, if you would like to discuss the findings after the webinar and go into a bit more detail, then please do get in touch and book in a one-to-one consultation with one of our strategists. Okay, so on to the webinar. So firstly, just to introduce ourselves, I'll go first. I'm Nick Wilmer, I'm Head of Client Strategy. I've been working in the education sector, education marketing, for over 11 years now. And my primary role at Natives is to work with our key strategic clients, developing marketing strategy, and then also analysing insights and knowledge from the sector and feeding that into client plans and strategy as well. But for the webinar, I'm going to be your host and lead the discussion with the panelists. So over to Kaz.
So I'm Cass, I lead our research function at NetNatives. I've been working in market research in the higher education sector for almost 6 years. I created the National Clearing Survey back in 2015. So it's definitely been like a baby project for me, but it's really great to see how it's grown over the years and really helped to inform like our thinking about clearing recruitment and the students. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to sharing the latest insights with you all today. And special thanks to all of our partners who took part and made this happen.
Thanks, Kaz. Afternoon, everyone. I'm Charlene Allen. I've worked in higher education now for the last 22 years. The last year I've been working as consultancy and advisors to organisations and universities. But before that, I used to work at the University of Portsmouth, University of Reading and the University of Southampton. And my most recent role was Director of Student Recruitment and International Relations. And I've been a part of many a strategic conversation and what the plans are for clearing. So I'm really looking forward to getting into the data and what the insights tell us for universities.
Brilliant, thank you both. Okay, so what I wanted to do first was to set the scene a little bit and look at data from not just the NCS, but also from across the sector and look at where we are. Without wanting to go over loads of old ground, I think most of us know what happened during clearing this year, fairly up to date with the events leading up to and after results day. So I wanted to just cover off some key facts, look at where we are, and then a little bit of a prediction as to what might happen in 2021. So firstly, looking at overall clearing acceptances, so we're up by 7%. Year on year, and that was led primarily by an increase from those directly applying to clearing this year as well, especially in later stages. The activity for clearing this year was obviously a bit odd, based on the government U-turn and the impacts of COVID and how that affected students' results, and then how students had rapidly changing grades and having to respond very quickly to that. So what happened was that the clearing activity actually happened a lot later than usual. So initially in the sort of the first few days, especially the first week, the numbers seemed to be down and they seemed to be quite slow. But then after the government U-turn, after the students started to get their get to grips with what grades they had and what options were available to them. Things seemed to pick up pace and then sort of happen later on down the funnel. There was definitely a continuation of the trend for students staying a bit closer to home. There was a trend happening anyway where students were staying closer to home, but definitely an acceleration happened due to COVID primarily, and having an impact on students' decisions. And that was not just mature or direct applicant students, that was across all age groups as well. And we did notice that in the north, they were more likely to stay at home, and in the south, they were more willing to travel. So again, possible socioeconomic factors coming into play there as well for people from certain areas. Looking at the deferral rate, what didn't actually change drastically year on year, so only up 0.3 percentage points. Obviously, applications from EU students have been hugely affected, but there wasn't a huge deferral that some people were thinking about during prior to clearing this year. Definitely looking forward into 2021 and what clearing might start to look like next year based on the stats. People are predicting there's going to be an increase in demand from students, so that's continuing that year-on-year increase, the rise in the number of 18-year-olds there are, and then also looking at possibly more direct applicants coming into the system as well for next year. So we're thinking about an overall increase of those applying to university next year as well. And then looking at that mature audience and that direct applicant audience, which there was a marked increase in 2020, and how that's going to look for 2021. There's that correlation between the number of jobs in the market and those then more people, if there's less jobs, more people that apply into higher education. And I think as we go into next year with strong possibility of a large recession happening and lack of job opportunities, we might then see greater demand from direct applicants going into next year. And then looking at the NCS, and we asked the students how they were affected during clearing 2020. As you can see, like 7 in 1 clearing students who we surveyed stated they were impacted by COVID-19. I would say it's probably a bit large. I think everyone was probably impacted, but in terms of the survey and people who mentioned that as something that happened to them during clearing, those numbers that came back. And looking at some of the numbers that happened due to the government U-turn around student grades, 62% of clearing students actually got upgraded after the U-turn. 23% of those tried to change university, 52% of them reapplied to their firm choice, and then 20% of them went to their insurance choice. So in a word, chaos, and certainly a difficult time to navigate if you're a student or an institution or a marketer within the university or institution. Then we looked at COVID as a potential barrier to going to university. And this applies to 2020, but then we start to look forward into 2021 about how the ongoing effects and how students might feel into next year. 36% of students said that COVID-19 was a barrier to going to university. And those main concerns lay around the impact of online learning and how that was going to affect how they learnt or how they were taught. The potential lack of social interaction, the actual catching and spreading of the virus. And there's definitely a point that comes from the data around, getting a full university experience and the value of what they're paying versus what they perceive to be, potentially not getting everything they wanted or what other students have got over time as well. And then finally, just generally around affordability and whether or not they can afford to go to university and live on campus and do things that other students would do. So then just some numbers as well, just to finalize how 2020 went. This is looking at more average and aggregated figures from our advertising on behalf of our clients during clearing this year. As you can see, the huge majority where we saw increases in average spend, in clicks and engagement, a number of calls tracked through the system. So not hugely surprising during what was, the most tumultuous clearing ever. The impacts of COVID, the impacts of the government U-turn, obviously, driving more to apply, a large increase in direct applicants, and then, chaos as students tried to work out what they were meant to do with the grades they got, and then once they were upgraded, what they then had to do to confirm places with universities they wanted to go to. So a large amount of increased engagement happening. Quite interesting. The interesting point on this slide is the aggregated CPCs decreased. So cost per clicks were actually down, and large part of that is primarily due to the fact we were using fully automated bidding during this clearing, and we found that clients had done enough prep on the search strategies prior to clearing, which means that no one was trying to make up any loss further into day with high manual bids. So the actual CPC stayed pretty low. However, ultimately clients did very well coming through that clearing, and some great success stories coming out the other side as well. So on to what everyone has been waiting for, the moment you've all been waiting for, on to the National Clearing Survey. And at this stage I'm going to hand over to Kaz, who's going to start taking us through the findings.
Thanks, Nick. No pressure. So yeah, I just wanted to start with a couple of slides here, looking just at the sample of the survey this year, just so everyone understands who took part and what that looks like. So this year we surveyed just over 3,500 clearing students, which meant that, again, the team were like super busy, analysing over 500,000 data points. Excel was not happy at sometimes, as I'm sure you can all imagine. And we had 38 of you partner with us to make this happen, and that included 1 in 3 Russell groups and 1 in 5 post-92 institutions, as well as other institutions, specialist institutions, and also HEFE institutions as well. But as the way the survey runs, it means that institutions can send out the survey to anyone who enrolled, applied or inquired over a clearing. So we actually had students going to 153 different HE institutions. Nick, I can't see the slides anymore on your screen.
I am just going to share my screen again. We've just had a slight technical hitch.
Okay. Our very beautifully designed slides, should I say, by our lovely...
There we go, we're back up and running. Apologies, everyone.
Perfect, thank you. Can you go back one slide?
Of course, yeah.
So then just looking at the demographics for this year's survey, and who that kind of average clearing student is, if there is really one, we see that it's very slightly older than last year. So this year 20.4 compared to 20.2 years of age. Really similar male-female split, however slightly more female, and on average higher UCAS points. So last year was 110 on average we saw for the clearing student, and this year it's 122, but that seems to be quite in line with what UCAS is reporting, and obviously everything that happened with grades this year is not quite comparable. But you can see there's responses from most of the UK, with England there being the most represented. But we know that this isn't really, like, there isn't one clearing student. So we've broken this down into the distinct segments that we've reported on previously. So this year, because of everything that was happening, we really wanted to check if there was a new segment. So was there perhaps this one-off COVID segment, those that were only going to go to university this year because of the COVID pandemic? So we looked through all the data, analysed everyone who said they were affected by COVID for different reasons to understand if their profile was any different, if their segment was any different. But we found that wasn't actually the case. So although there wasn't a distinct COVID segment, we know that all segments here were in some way affected by COVID, and we have detailed this in their profiles where it's relevant. So again, this year we have the same 4 segments that we've seen in previous years. So the traditional student, so those that have gone through clearing because they didn't get the grades they needed or because they didn't receive any offers when they originally applied. The direct applicant, so these are students that didn't apply in the traditional cycle and only applied to university through clearing. The mind changer, so those that go through clearing, not because they have to, but because they've changed their mind on normally like socioeconomic reasons, so such as like wanting to study in a new place or a different university, different location. And then the adjustment students, so those students that have gone through clearing because they've achieved better grades than expected. and were therefore able and looking to upgrade. And when looking at market share from 2016, which is when we first created these different segments, we can see that the direct applicant is the only segment here that's grown. And from our data, we've seen that that's grown again this year. So last year it was 33%, now it's 35%. And as Nick said, that's kind of been one of the big driving factors that UCAS have reported in terms of that clearing audience, the rise of the direct applicant. So all other profiles have seen some declines since 2016. However, as you can see here, that traditional student is still the largest segment with 40% of the population. So I'm going to go through some information on each of these segments on the next few slides. There's a lot of data on all of these, but I'll try and, I'm not going to go through everything either, but we will obviously be sharing everything after this. I'm just going to pull out some of the more interesting stats as we go through. So, as I said, this is the largest segment with 40% of the sample. The youngest of all the groups with an average age of 19, predominantly female, which we see across all the samples. Most likely to want to study biological sciences, humanities, or the social sciences. And they have the joint least average UCAS points with 120, which is the same as the direct applicant this year. And all groups, as we've seen in previous years, are motivated by the course, the career prospects, and the course modules and content. However, the traditional student over-indexes on motivations around the institution being a Russell group, the accommodation being available, and also the quality of the online learning, which is a new thing for this year. And also when we're looking at top barriers for this group, so what those things are going to stop them potentially going or applying, they're around the living costs, entry requirements, and also COVID-19. Obviously, hopefully COVID-19 won't be a barrier for too much longer, but it's something to consider right now for this audience. So this group is also the least likely to be a first generation student with 47%, compared to all the other groups where they're 50%. So they are quite close, but it's just definitely the least likely. A third of this group start their research early, so June or before, but they're also equally as likely to not actually do any research at all. So they have some inclination that maybe they might be going through clearing process, but a lot of them don't really have an idea, hence why they're not doing any research there. Parents are the top influencer for all groups, which we'll see when we go through them all. And friends normally comes around second. However, the traditional student is the only one where the university staff appears in the top 3 as well. So considering how influential actually your staff are in terms of this audience is going to be really key here. They're most active on Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, and TikTok on a daily basis. They spend most of their time across video on demand when it comes to traditional media. They also, as we've seen in previous years, they experience the most negative emotions. So when they receive their grades, they're really sad, they're disappointed, they're angry, which then goes to feeling stressed, anxious, and nervous when they're actually searching for a place, but finally ending up feeling relieved, happy, and excited. But that's quite the journey, I think, that these students are going on. So we're going to pick up a bit on that later, but think about how we can support them throughout that journey. And they were the most impacted by COVID, with 73% actively stating that COVID impacted their choice in some way throughout this clearing process. So we then move on to our next group, which is a direct applicant. So this is the second largest, and as I said before, it's the only one that's growing. So it's going to be interesting to watch this. As we've been saying over the last few years, we predict this is just going to continue to grow and grow. So definitely an interesting group here. They're the oldest by quite a bit, so their average age is 22.5, and over half of this group received their results in 2019 or before, so they aren't that traditional student. They're not going through the traditional cycle in any way. It's got the highest percentage of males to females, but the same as we saw last year, and obviously it's still more heavily female here than male. Most likely to go to a post-92 or another institution, and study subjects such as allied to medicine, so things like nursing, as well as social sciences and business and accounting. As I said before, they've got the lowest UCAS points with the traditional student, but again, higher than what we saw last year. And the motivators are the same for all profiles, those top 3, but being close to home, the funding available and the tuition costs are more important to direct applicants than they are to that average student. And again, we kind of see this mirrored here in the barriers where cost of living and cost of tuition are both really high there for them in terms of entry. They're the highest first generation group, with 57% of the direct applicant being first generation. And almost half of this group also did no research prior to clearing. So they're going to be quite difficult to engage with in that pre-clearing period. And unlike the other profiles, Facebook features here as one of their top 4 daily social media channels. In all the other 4, TikTok is that 4th one. However, they still quite like Facebook, and because of that kind of more mature audience there. And unlike the traditional student, they're much more positive throughout the process. So we see when they receive their results, obviously some of them received their results quite a while ago, they were happy, excited, nervous about it. And when they received their place, they were happy, relieved, excited. But they still had those more negative emotions when they were trying to secure their place and finding one. So nervous, anxious, and stressed, which is something we see across all the profiles. We then go on to the third persona, so the mind changer. And this accounts for almost a quarter of the audience, but it has shrunk slightly, so just a little bit less. And as I said before, they go through clearing, they've changed their mind on what they want to do, so they're actively going through clearing. They want to study a different course or a different university or go to a different location. So the motivations are a bit different to the ones we've just seen. And unlike the traditional and the direct student, mental health here is one of the top 3 barriers for this group when going to university. So again, thinking about how we can support that group more, and they might need more support than maybe some of the other groups. So this group is also most likely to start their research by June, so they are quite early, so 44% of them are starting their research June or before. As I said, they've got very similar like social media and traditional media patterns to the traditional student, and they are mostly positive like throughout the process. As I said, like it's their choice to go through clearing, so they normally are quite happy with the results they've received, but again they still have those negative emotions when they're actually looking for a place. And we move on to our final and the smallest group. So this has got smaller and smaller throughout the years. So it's now only 3% of the sample. So it'll be interesting to see what this looks like next year, and actually if it's big enough for us to think about including this group and what they look like. But they proportionally, like in previous years, had the highest proportion of males. So last year was 44% male. However, this year we're only seeing 31% of this group as male. So there's definitely like a shift there in the demographics that we've seen from this sample, at least. They're most likely to attend a Russell Group institution, and then either looking to study business or STEM subjects, which I don't think is a surprise on either of those things. They also have the highest UCAS points of all groups. And again, we've seen a higher average than we had in previous years. So across all the profiles, they've all seen a much higher average UCAS points. Again, the top 3 motivators there are the same, but they over-index on being motivated by what the rankings are of the course and also the TEF scores as well. And so this group is the most likely to start their research early, with 53% of this group doing that, so from June or before. And then unlike the other groups, teachers at their schools are very influential to them. So those outreach activities is going to be really key for this audience specifically. Like, are you the institution that their teachers are talking about? Going to be very key. So that brings us to the end of going through the segments.
Brilliant, thank you, Kaz. Okay, so we're going to try something brave now. We're going to try and do a poll, and we want to ask you, the viewers, which of those segments do you think you need the most help with to recruit next year? So we've got the traditional, the direct, the mind changers, and the adjustment.
Votes coming in. This is really exciting.
I know, yeah. What's it going to be?
No, literally, I just love data, so it's just like it's more data. I need to
polling throughout the entire webinar. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like most people have inputted. So if I end the poll and then share the results, can everyone see that?
I can see
Great.
it. I can always see it.
Fantastic. So we seem to have the clear winner where people are, I suppose, struggling or need a bit more help is from the direct applicant group. And that's, yeah, certainly a group that is more difficult because If you look at traditional, if you look at mind changers and adjustment students, they all started their journey very early on. They started researching, back in May, and you've got the opportunity to market to that audience and to capture them and to remarket throughout the process and then remarket during the clearing period. Whereas direct applicants, from the stats that Kaz just took us through, actually, they're not doing any research. They're coming into it late in the game, not on the day. And actually, as we saw this year, pretty late in the day after A-level results day came through as well. So a little more difficult to target. So I think it's about, planning effectively for the day, working out what that direct applicant audience looks like for you. So what age groups, what interests that you want to target. And again, what are the key factors that direct applicant audience cares most about? So that when, you are advertising, in the weeks after A-level results day, you're using messaging and positioning that is most effective against that audience to try and pull them through and to take some market share, during the days of clearing. Charlie and Kaz, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
I think just the average age, obviously, Kaz mentioned, that's kind of 3.5 years older than the traditional, and potentially those students are taking gap years, and it's really, as an institution, I'd be wondering, how can I access, how do I get to those students who have maybe gone on their travels or taken a year out to do some work experience before starting university. And as it's one of the areas that our audience is most interested in getting support for, I think maybe for the organisation to think about how they can help universities reach out to those particular students. And also thinking about traditional and direct, we're seeing more students go beyond the 15th of January deadline in the normal cycle and taking their applications right up until the June deadline. So actually a shift in the comms as well for those two students, I think is interesting to look at.
Absolutely, yeah. I think looking at overall across all the different segments, it just shows the importance of segmentation. Not just running one big brand campaign that's all encompassing to promote the university during clearing, but really working out what your segments are. So not just, these are segments that we've pulled from our data across the sector, but specific institutions will have different segments, different target markets that they want to take market share from, they want to target. So running your own research, if you have participated in NCS, then using that to work out which segments are most appropriate for you as an institution. Where are you going to focus your time and attention and spend as well during that time. I
think it's also interesting to, across the profiles, the medical or courses associated with kind of medical was across all of them. And given that career prospects is also something that comes up across them all, thinking about focus and perhaps students are going to be looking more to those subjects allied to medicine, especially given the pandemic and the impact that's going to have on the employment prospects. And one of the areas obviously that we're going to need more of as we work our way through this is people in health services. Yeah. So I'm just raising it as an area perhaps as focus for investment more in that subject area if your portfolio has that included.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I'm going to move along to the next section now because we're half an hour in and we've got quite a few key findings to go through. So on to the next section, looking at the key findings, we'll pass you back over to Kaz.
Thanks, Nick. I will try and go through these quickly so we do finish within time. So our first key finding focuses on the important factors that students are considering when they're picking their university clearing choice. And online learning quality is one of the most important factors for clearing students. So we hadn't previously asked this question, but with COVID and the rise of online, we felt this was really applicable this year. So 1 in 4 students rated online learning quality as 10 out of 10 when choosing where to study in clearing. So really important for them, really key. And as we discussed in the profiles, the top factors are still the same and haven't changed over time. With the top 6 contributing to clearing choice as the subject, the course content, the career prospects, the institution location, the facilities and the entry requirements. However, we now see that online learning is pretty much on par with entry requirements, and trumps 14 other factors, including it's more important than rankings and accommodations and cost. So it has really, like, it is very important to these students, and we need to consider that when we're thinking about talking about your accommodation. Well, actually, we should be talking about the online learning quality there as well. And when we break this down into the different segments, we notice that it's especially important for traditional clearing students, as online learning is the most important factor after subject, course content and career prospects there, so joint with entry requirements. But as you can see, it appears in the top 6 for all groups. So it is important for everyone. It's just especially important for that. I feel like, Nick, you're laughing at the little GIF.
I am, I'm laughing at the GIF, I'm so sorry.
Paying full attention.
Professional focus.
And then, so we go on to the next slide. So we also asked students a free text question around their concerns about going to university during COVID. And through this, we were able to see kind of 4 key areas that students were concerned about in relation to online learning, which definitely need to be addressed in communications. So students felt that online learning could mean that the quality of the teaching was poorer, the lack of contact time would impact their learning. It'd be harder for them to concentrate, and also harder for them to understand the content of their course. So generally they felt like they weren't getting the best experience, and they weren't getting the best experience to get the best results out of themselves. So these are all kind of areas that we need to consider when we're talking about online learning quality, and maybe debunk some of these myths which aren't true.
Yeah, I think very quick with the poll then. What we wanted to do, because this is from students and what their perception was going to be of online learning and how it might impact their studies. But we wanted to find out from you as institutions, which of these rings the most true, from actual real feedback from your students. Are you getting this feedback after they've started and actually have started using, started engaging with the online platform? Off you go, everyone talk amongst themselves while we wait for the results to come in. Let's get one of those countdown clocks.
Yeah. Make everyone stressed out though, listening to that.
Yeah, great for us to find.
I think this is really interesting because different universities have approached this in a very different way. So some have done face-to-face teaching or tutorials, and some have done everything online. So perception versus reality, I think, is going to be really interesting across the board.
We're going to end the poll and share the results. So it looks like from those that have answered, actually the largest feedback that we're getting from students actually is around quality of teaching being poorer. So that matching up with the perception that students have sort of going into that. So again, when looking at the messaging around your online learning and making sure that, in terms of debunking myths and which ones to address the most, that seems to be the most important, and this could potentially put students off, but also lack of contact time and how that impacts learning as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if we go on to the next slide. So looking at online learning, I'll kick off, Charlene, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
So 1 in 4 students, I'm just going to hide that one. 1 in 4 students said that how important online learning is going to be. And I think it's going to continue to be important into 2021. Whatever university teaching looks like in 2021, and when the vaccine kicks in and when we'll be through this, there's still going to be online learning is still going to play a huge role in what we do when we're going backwards. So I mean, so beyond the obvious of ensuring that you've got a robust online tech setup, the infrastructure's there, the academics are trained how to use the platform to make sure you're able to deliver it. I think as marketers, the natural response is to build positioning statements to address all those concerns that we just went through. But then again, everyone's going to do that. So everyone's having to move into online, or had to move onto online, and everyone's going to say how impressive their online setup is. But that doesn't really differentiate you. There's no specific USP there. So I think that the universities that have done the best and the ones that are the ones that actually prove how good their online setup is. And you can take a bit of inspiration from the private sector in terms of how that looks as well. But access, free access to courses and taster sessions, online demonstrations of the platform themselves, so people can actually go in and see what a tutorial or a lecture will look like. And then get some real testimonials from current learners as well, talking about how easy the platform is to use and how much they've got from it as well, and how it may have gone against what they originally thought might be the experience of online learning. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Charlene.
I think just the online learning engagement and how that plays out, I think is and how you articulate that in your communications to potential students and students coming through clearing next year even. I think that will be really important. And also that issue around, their accommodation now becoming their study area, their kind of, that's their lecture room, and that need to have that seamless kind of support service in place for them, so that their learning experience is not just about the content that's being delivered, but also the environment in which they're being taught in. And again, how you articulate that through your communications to prospective students, I think will be really important, because that may impact their perception or their feeling of what their study experience is like.
Yeah, well, I should steal this idea from you, Charlene, but we have seen where institutions, as part of their virtual open days, they've incorporated, those online tester courses and tutorials into the open day. But the idea is, don't just leave it there. How do you take that content, redevelop it, and actually put it into your advertising? Because that's incredibly strong content to lead with. Don't just leave it in an open day, but how do you actually spread it? And actually use it to demonstrate how effective the online learning is. Okay, so on to the next one, Kaz.
Thanks. Yeah, so our next key finding focuses on something that's very familiar but also upsetting topic for us all. So this year we found that 1 in 3 students reported that mental health or confidence as were 2 of the key barriers to going to university, which is much more prevalent than we saw in our data last year. It's interesting what Charlene, you were just talking about being your bedroom is now your lecture hall, and obviously that kind of isolation we know isn't great for mental health. So thinking about how, if someone's already experiencing that and if they already think it's a barrier, how we can overcome that and support these students more. But it definitely is something that seems to be rising and obviously quite prevalent in the data from this year. And so for those that selected mental health as a barrier, the main concerns around how COVID would then affect their university experience were that lack of social interaction. So making friends is really key, settling into university, everyone knows that. Lectures being online, so how would this work, whether it would impact the quality of teaching, the lack of contact time with lecturers, again being isolated there. Some of the financial aspects and how that impacts their mental health, and also the impact of COVID-19. And then also just generally not getting that full university experience everyone talks about and is so important. A lot of people say that obviously they go to university because they get that social experience, and how do you try and replicate that with everything going on? But it's so important that people aren't isolated and they are engaged with, and they do make friends and they settle in. So obviously if 1 in 3 students really thinking that, we want to make sure we support those students throughout the process. And then we've got 3 slides here with lots of them. I've just realised how angry this slide looks.
Yeah, it does.
When it's full screen at you, at all the emotions that students felt during that clearing process. So we can really kind of see actually how damaging clearing is for them. So these are the top emotions across everyone for when they first receive their results, and obviously the sample is 40% traditional student. So we can see here that we've got a bit more weighting, I guess, towards them. So disappointed, sad were those kind of top 2, sad, stressed, nervous, worried, confused, and angry. So it is predominantly like negative. We have got happy, relieved, excited, which we kind of saw from those other profiles, but overall, like there is a lot of like negative kind of like feeling there, predominantly for the traditional student, but there is still negative feelings for the other audiences as well. And then when we go on to the next slide, so this is all about when they're trying to look for a place and securing their place. And this is, as we like touched on earlier, this doesn't matter if whichever segment they are, whether they've chosen to go through clearing or if it's a decision that's kind of been made for them, their top emotions are still like nervousness, anxiousness, worried, stress. Like it's causing like a lot of negative emotions, this process, especially this part where they're actually trying to find their place. So whatever we can do to try and improve at least that part of the clearing journey would have a massive impact, we think, on how students feel in this process, and then therefore hopefully help their mental health. And then when we go on to the last slide, so this is their emotions that they feel once they've secured their place. So we can see it is much more positive here. They're excited, they're happy, they're relieved. However, there are still like negative emotions in here. When you look through them all, there's a lot of words. They're annoyed, they're exhausted, they're apprehensive. So have they made like the right decisions there? They're uncertain, they're scared. So even at this stage, even though they are predominantly much more positive, there's still a lot of support that they need. They need to make sure they've made the right decision. And the university is the best place. You're the best people to be talking to them about why they've made the right decision and why you're the best fit for them and how you're going to support them through that process.
Okay, and then Charlene, they've got quite a bit of experience in this area, so do you want to kick off on this one?
Yeah, sure. I think sadly we've seen an increase in the number of young adults with mental health issues over previous years, and I think unfortunately, you know, COVID has exacerbated that issue, and universities are having to grapple with that issue and provide support services and put things in place to help those students once they arrive at the university. I think in terms of the emotions, we can see across the profiles, other than the direct applicant through clearing, or the direct clearing student seems less negative and less stressed than others. And I think for me that kind of reinforces perhaps the need to go with the kind of post-qualification admissions process that we've all been talking about for a long time. And I'd be keen to hear from our colleagues in the audience in the chat whether they agree with a post qualification admissions process. But all that I see here kind of supports that idea. I think the other thing is around the comms. You mentioned Kaz, and perhaps the admissions process, trying to make that as seamless as possible, trying to be as empathetic as possible. I know universities have done a lot of that during this year, certainly, but it looks as though that's the kind of thing that is required into the future as well, not just because of COVID and the impact the pandemic has had on students. And then thinking about the confidence issue, actually thinking about outreach and how universities can work with their outreach teams to look at how we build confidence in young adults before they get to university, maybe something that would be worthwhile looking at.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, like the resilience for these like students, so that how prepared are they if they don't get the grades they need, and if they need to go through clearing, like, because it's definitely like it's probably the most stressful time that they've experienced in most students' lives at that point, and there's only so much universities can do that you can really do by yourself. So yeah, joining up them, I think that makes sense.
Okay, I'm going to whip through because we are running against the clock here, so over to you, Kaz.
Yep. So key finding number 3. So we continue to see Facebook losing its market share amongst the clearing student audience. So another year of declines. We've now 31% of this audience using it on a daily basis compared to 66% back in 2016. And then in contrast to that, with a great GIF here, now using TikTok daily compared to last year around the survey, it was 3.4% said they used it on a daily basis. So that's an increase of 1,167% from last year. So Facebook's losing out, TikTok is gaining that. It's going to be interesting to see how that continues to grow. And we go on to the next slide. This is just looking at the overall platforms. So probably need a bit of explanation on all these percentages. So the top bubbles is looking at the percent in those is the average daily use. So 76% of the clearing audience use Instagram on a daily basis, 69% use Snapchat, 62% use YouTube. We see like these Pinterest and LinkedIn are the smallest ones here with 5% and 3%. And then we've got the row underneath that looks at the growth in daily use since last year. So we can see pretty much most of them have seen actually declines, or they've remained the same since last year. You can see Pinterest has increased by 25%, but that just means it went from 4% of people using it last year to 5% of people using it this year daily. And then what we just said around TikTok, that's a huge percent like increase, which means it's like the 4th most popular daily used social media across this audience in general. And then this last line is looking at the increase since 2016. So there, when we look from 2016, most platforms have seen increases, apart from Facebook and Twitter that have both seen decreases in their daily use. There's a lot of percentages on there, but hopefully that will make sense. So the top 3 used platforms are Instagram, Snapchat, and YouTube, and the top growing platform is TikTok, as we just said.
Okay, so it's poll time again. The final one this time. We want to know who used TikTok in the last clearing activity and campaigns. Oh, interesting.
Still
I think that's everyone. I think that's done. Okay, so we'll share it. Okay, so a few have done, but it seems like the large majority didn't use TikTok in the last clearing campaign. So certainly an area to include or potentially include for 2021 and going into next year, given the number of new users and how it's growing within the database. I thought I'd just share some sort of key points and advice around marketing through TikTok, which we recently released a white paper on as well. I think the key factors around TikTok are keep it simple. It's a real danger of universities just posting lots around videos of the campus and all the amazing things they do. That's not what students want to see on TikTok. It needs to be fun, it needs to be engaging. It's a content-led platform. It's a user-generated platform. So it should be student-led. It should come from your students, the content. If you look and work out who the study tubers and the study influencers are within your own student database and engage with them, they can help you to create content that students actually want to see. And there's definitely a point around you're not trying to use TikTok to sell anything. I think students pick up on that really quickly. Use it to solve problems. Your universities and education institutions, and you've got the opportunity to solve lots of these problems we're talking about. So concerns around mental health, about their poor online learning experiences, they're maybe uncomfortable in their current living situation. What is it that you as a university, speaking through the voice of the student, can do to help them? And that content's going to come across a lot better.
I think, Nick, the interesting thing, I think, given that things have had to be digital and virtual and open days have had to become virtual, research has shown after kind of ranking subject, location, things like that, it's that feel factor that ends up being the reason why a student chooses an institution. And they tend to get that from physically being there. And I think the challenge for student marketeers and universities is how do you make that connection with the student? How do you get that feel factor? And which of the platforms are best used for information and which ones are used for kind of generating that sense of connection and belonging and feeling to an institution, and at what stages of the funnel they're most useful. So just an observation, really, and a thought.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's a slight danger of, we've got this one channel that works particularly well, or this brand new channel that we want to use, and you throw all your marketing spend and all your concentration down that one angle. But actually, it's looking at much wider spread marketing mix and channels that you have available, and understanding how each of them feed into that particular funnel. So which ones are best to drive awareness, which ones are best to drive direct response. And the only way to really understand that is by tracking effectively, by ad serving, by setting up attribution modeling. You can start to see how, a final conversion, where that came from, what were the touch points during that particular prospective student's life cycle that got them to actually enroll. If you can set that level of tracking up and you can start to understand that journey, you can then start to make much cleverer decisions around what the marketing mix is going to be. And you can actually, going into next year, if you start tracking that, you can then start to optimize and be agile as you approach clearing and change what the marketing mix and improve responses throughout. Okay, I'm going to skip on to the fourth main point.
Yep, so our fourth key finding is really focused around how students want to engage with you throughout clearing. And we've definitely seen a shift towards students wanting to engage with more modern tools and communication channels. So this year, obviously, UCAS brought out their Clearing Plus service. And we found that 3 in 10 of the clearing students said they use this, but of those that did, 85% said they found it really helpful. So there's definitely a need there to try and reduce some of the complexities, I guess, but like behind trying to find a course or a university, looking at like a short list of things that would already work for you is obviously something that students have said is useful and interesting. So thinking about how you might be able to produce something similar to that. And then when looking at contact methods, we see a disparity between how students contact the university versus how they want to be able to be contacting the university. So 1 in 7 students told us they used either text message, social media, video call, or live chat to contact their clearing university, but almost double this. So 1 in 4 students said they would like to use these methods and want them available to them. So we're thinking about and investing in these for next year. And we also see in general, like online methods have grown in interest over the years. So this includes email in here as well. So back in 2018, 49% of students wanted to use some sort of online methods as part of their contact process, whereas this year it's 57%, so that has grown quite a bit there. So there's definitely a need to provide different communication channels for these students. And when we look at the more traditional methods, so when we're looking at phone call, this is still key, so definitely don't drop all your phone lines. That's not what we're saying. 86% of students called up a university this year during clearing. However, 16% of this would have preferred not to. So only 70% wanted this to be an option. So thinking back to what we were talking about with like mental health and that process of securing a place and how it caused, I guess, like all those negative emotions, people might not want to be on the phone. Like they could be very emotional, they could be crying, they could be upset. It's very difficult to talk when you're overcome with that level of emotions. So those other channels are like not only what they want to use, but maybe what they're going to have to use, and maybe they could be deterred away if they can't use some of those like channels to engage and contact you over that clearing period.
Yeah, I totally agree, Kaz. I think that it's that mismatch between what students are saying they want and they want to engage online during that period, because what they're used to. And anything universities can do to relieve stress during that period. That's going to be one of the most stressful times they've gone through in their entire lives up to that point for quite a lot of the students. And making them pick up a phone if they're not particularly happy with that, when they are upset or they are stressed out, isn't going to help. So just making sure that you're allowing as many options as you can, making sure you're resourcing video chat or live chat or messaging, so that students can quickly access the information they want through whichever channel they feel most comfortable with. And make sure you're promoting that as well within your advertising, because it's relatively easy to build in clicks to live chat and click to messaging within a number of the platforms. So if that's what students are saying they want, allowing them that option is just going to make everything easier, and might make that slight bit of difference. When they're going through, when they've got their A-level results and they're deciding on what to go through. If you're promoting it in the right way, you might be able to steer them towards you and take some market share. So really important to make sure that's built in.
Yeah, I think you're right. The kind of making that admissions process as frictionless as possible for students will help with the anxiety and stress that they feel generally throughout that process. And then looking at kind of resourcing and clearing practices overall for an institution based on these findings would be useful, I think, as well. But what I find interesting looking at this and then looking at some of the slides earlier is that the students want to use kind of video chat and your online resources to access during clearing, but when it comes to their teaching and learning, they want to physically be in a classroom. And I don't know, maybe there's some learnings from one to the other and vice versa, or whether it's about transactional versus emotional. I don't know, but that kind of dynamic is really interesting in the new profile of a student at the moment, I think.
I agree. Okay, on to the last key finding.
So the final finding for this year's sneak peek at the data. So this year we also saw really high levels of uncertainty in clearing students in their choices. So with 3 in 5 students feeling unsure about at least one aspect of their choice. So when we break that out into into what they felt unsure about, we can see the biggest concerns here around the university that they chose and if they made the right choice here. So 4 in 10 students said they had some concerns about which institution they picked. 3 in 10 also said they had concerns about the course they picked. We then found that 2 in 10 clearing students said they were considering either transferring to a different course or a different institution. And 10% said it was likely that they might defer or drop out. So definitely here there's more in terms of uncertainty about if they've made the right choice as opposed to thinking they might take action about doing it. So I think there's definitely preventative action that you can all take in terms of making sure these students feel supported, which I'm sure you're all doing. And when we also found we break this out into the different demographics, we see students from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds feel in general much less confident about their decisions than white students as well. So there might be a different strategy that you need to take towards different types of demographics. So it's worth considering looking at your data and breaking it out like that as well. And the final thing for this point, so we found that those going to a Russell Group institution were the most confident about their university choice. So if you're a Russell Group on this, that's a slight sigh of relief, and the least likely therefore to consider transferring or dropping out. However, if you mostly recruit traditional students, they were overall the least confident segment that they'd made the right decision about their university or their course, and were more likely to think about dropping out or transferring. So as I said, like on the previous slide, there's definitely different tactics that need to be taken for different types of students, and also depends on where they're going as well.
Yeah, I think, just to reiterate some of those points, Kat, I think, I suppose it's about understanding your students as well, isn't it? That, from those results, we know there are concerns there. There are potential students looking to transfer, to drop out. They're concerned about what choices they've made. We've not seen a massive difference in terms of actual dropout so far this year, which was kind of predicted and never really came true. But also we're coming up to Christmas, so there's more hope now going into a new year with a vaccine as well. So that might help with this. But I think just surveying your students and speaking to your students and understanding which ones are potentially at risk and which ones are struggling the most with the choices they've made and concerned about their studies and where they're going, identifying who they are, and then building more support around them, through communications and through outreach, and making sure that they are supported. And like you said, just working on segmentation again. So the current students that you've got, each individual segment does have different concerns and worries, are more likely to be unhappy and might need more support. So not just having one blanket message, but tailoring your message effectively so that people are receiving the information they need and they want. Have you got any final thoughts, Charlene?
I just think it goes back to that issue around confidence, the profile of students and the issue around confidence, and thinking about how universities can help build the confidence in their decision. So is that about the content or what they're saying to those students, or is it about frequency, kind of really trying to help them better understand their choice and reinforcing that they have made the right choice?
Yeah, certainly. Okay, brilliant. I think we're done for key findings now. So just a few key takeaways from what we've just spoken about. Firstly, the positive actions between now and the UCAS deadline that you can potentially take to improve conversion rates. So going back to messaging around online learning, providing real access to the platform, and proving how happy students are with the level of teaching that's happening. Content around mental health support that you offer, showing students that you have the resources and ability to help students. And then financial support, providing confidence that students are going to get value for money. All key things that students want to see from their institution and can help with advertising going up to the January deadline. Communications in general, the need for them to be informative, clear, timely, and supportive. And how can you help reduce the stress and anxiety that students are going through at the moment, and making sure that that those communications are helping. Looking at the key segments, segmentation is key. Looking at what targeting you've got in place, whether you can improve that positioning and the content that's going out to them. We spoke about traditional students versus direct students and different messaging being needed for those two different segments in order to take market share. Looking at BAM, looking at WP students, and what kind of variant messaging might be needed to engage with those audiences as well, and how you're going to support those groups. And then finally looking at the channels as well. So having that multi-channel approach, but making sure that you've got the right levels of tracking in place, you're modeling attribution and working out exactly what impact those various channels and campaigns and tactics that you're taking are having on the overall journey of a student. And then finally, just making sure that we've got TikTok in the media plans as well, and keeping that simple and keeping it student focused. Okay, so we're just going to go offline just for a couple of minutes, some quick talk, look at the questions that have come through. We're back online, and we'll answer those questions and then we'll wrap up. Okay, we are back. I'm just going to wait for Charlene and Kaz to reappear. There they are. Difficult question, guys. I'm not going to lie. Definitely been stretched. The first question was from your own feedback, Intel. What have student applicants been saying is the best platform approach for giving them an idea of what a potential provider is like? I don't have any data on this, but what I would say is thinking about which of the platforms and the channels that you're using and how they map onto the funnel. So when you're looking at awareness, when you're trying to raise, trying to get almost that emotional connection across and get people starting to think about who you are and what you do and what you offer, sort of in a wider, more awareness way, then it's platforms like the, video content that works across YouTube and social media and even TikTok. They're particularly good for high volume, getting more impressions, getting more video views, getting more people to see and engage with you and your offering. But then using more direct tactics further down the funnel. So once people have found out about you and have started researching you, they've engaged with your website, then using remarketing and programmatic and social media and search to actually sort of push them over the line and have those final pieces of content and messaging that gets them to take that next step and make an application. I didn't really answer the question, but I think I tried my very best to get around that. The next question was there anything asked about how many contact points a student had with a university from point of deciding to searching, clearing and securing a place, and whether different contact methods were preferred for different parts of the process, so live chat, initial inquiry, offer by phone? No, we didn't ask those questions within the NCS survey this year, so nothing in particular that we can answer on that one. But again, I think it comes down to tracking. If you're able to track those touch points from start to finish within your own ecosystem and marketing mix, you'll be able to start answering some of those questions. But it's definitely something we can include in the survey for next year. And then we had another question, which was, is there any data on the reasons why direct applicants chose to apply to university? So particularly through clearing, was it because they've been made redundant and needed to retrain? Or was it ZMOT deciding factor? Kaz, can you answer that one?
Yes, we do ask why direct applicants went through the clearing process. I was just getting my spreadsheet up because I can't remember all the data off the top of my head. But for like 38% of the group, they said it was because they only just decided to apply. So it was kind of that last minute. So that's that kind of audience that weren't doing any like research beforehand. And then for 30% of the audience, they said they had a change in personal circumstances, which would include things like jobs or anything to do with their career or their lifestyle. We do also ask people to like write in some commentary as well. So if you've taken part in it and in your own individual data, you'll be able to see some of that free text as well. That's come through like specifically. As I get any of it to load, but just being
maybe because it's students who would have otherwise taken a gap year and travelled, and then because of COVID decided actually I'm not going to be able to do that. I'll go to university earlier.
Yeah, I think that is like some of the reasons that come out in this. So yeah, COVID did have like an impact, but yeah, that mixture of they only just decided to apply, and then that change in personal circumstances. This seems to be like the two kind of key reasons why people were direct and went through clearing.
Brilliant, thank you. And then one final question is around TikTok. Always finish on TikTok. Is TikTok better for brand awareness, or could it be part of your decision or conversion pipeline? Again, from the experience that we've had and the campaigns that we've run, TikTok does sit better within that awareness section because of the type of content, the type of advertising that it's more engaging, because it's student focused and student led, and it's not about directly getting someone to click straight away and make a direct response. It's more about building that brand and profile within the student audience and getting them to love you a bit. Having said that, there is always, people can click through and come through to the website or through to a landing page. And once you've got them through to the landing page, you can then pull them into remarketing pools and audiences, and then start to engage with them through other platforms that we know are better, at making that that final decision, that final conversion point. Okay, I think that's everything in terms of questions. All done. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for asking me very difficult questions. That was great. So I wanted just to finish off by saying again, if you do want to book a one-to-one consultation with one of our strategists, then you'll receive relevant links after the webinar. Let me just come to the final slide, that might help. There we go. Or email marketing@netnatives.com. But finally, a big thank you to all our panelists today. And thank you all for attending and listening and engaging with our multiple polls. And I hope everyone has a very enjoyable Christmas. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.
Everyone, bye.